Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples Integrated Recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Have you ever noticed how strange our kindness distribution can be sometimes? That sometimes we can be more patient with a stranger or a person at a grocery store than we might be with our friends that we see all the time, that we might be more patient with our friends that we see all the time than we are with our family. And then when it comes to ourselves, some of us are just absolutely ruthless to ourselves. And what's bizarre about this is that when you're attacking yourself, the person delivering the blows and the person taking the hits are the exact same nervous system. So the question isn't whether we are harsh on ourselves, that's already obvious, but a more accurate question is, why does this feel so justified? That's what I want to explore today. Not in a sentimental way, not in a be nicer to yourself way, but in a psychologically accurate way. Because there is a massive difference between self-compassion and internal self-attack, and confusing the two is something that can keep people stuck. Let's start with compassion in general. Most humans experience it automatically. If you see an injured animal or a child in distress or someone who is unquestionably, clearly suffering, for most people, something reacts before you even think. There's no checklist or analysis, no moral verdict. That response, for most people, is hardwired. And it's hardwired because human beings survive when we care and are attached with others. A human infant cannot survive without sustained, attuned attention. Our nervous system depends on it. So compassion isn't a virtue add-on for most people, it's a regulatory function. The real issue isn't that people lack compassion, it's that as we grow and develop, many of us shut it down selectively. Notice how quickly compassion collapses once judgment enters the equation. So if, let's say, I read recently about a kid on Marco Island that was robbed in the middle of the night. And if you look at like the time that it took place and everything else, something probably pings for most readers like, this sounds potentially like it was a drug deal that went sideways. And so, fact, someone got robbed, but notice the judgment. Well, this late, like, should he have been out there? Was he maybe doing something else? Someone is assaulted. Well, they were dressed provocatively is something that someone may say. Or if somebody is struggling with addiction, then for people who haven't ever struggled with addiction, they may be able to just immediately jump on moralizing. They don't have good self-restraint, or they need to, make better choices. And the moment that judgment takes over, compassion can disappear. Now, wisdom matters, and learning from consequences matters. Avoiding danger matters. But compassion is not post-event analysis. Compassion should be about reducing suffering the moment that it exists. If someone ignored a sign on a beach in Florida that said sharks are in the water and they got bit, it's possible that we can still treat a wound without prosecuting them or leaving them dying on the beach, telling them, you should have known better. We get hurt and then we interrogate, shame, and sentence ourselves. But here is the pattern that many people miss. We aren't harsh on ourselves because we are disciplined or accountable. We are harsh on ourselves because threat runs our internal world. We have a fear of being weak, fear of being exposed, fear of being ordinary and not memorable or not seen, or fear of being rejected. Internal self-attack is a threat management strategy, but self-compassion is a strength-based one, and that distinction really matters. Many people assume that self-compassion means letting yourself off the hook, like it removes accountability. It doesn't. Self-compassion means responding differently without adding an additional, unnecessary internal voice that is explicitly hard on yourself. Because there's already the pain of a situation, and then there is a pain of how we relate to ourselves inside of it. Some people might pile those together and say that it's motivation, but there is a structural insight here that matters. Compassion functions like concentric circles. So one circle, strangers, then friends, then family, then self. And for most people, compassion weakens as it moves inward. So hardest on ourselves, then family, friends, out. So when people say, I want to be more compassionate, many times they try to start outward. They try to be more patient or more kind or more giving, but this is actually backwards. If the center of this entire system is hostile, then everything downstream is going to be capped. But when compassion can increase at the core toward yourself, it amplifies outward automatically. That's not philosophy, that's mechanics. So think of it like a bicycle. You can spin the tire by hand and get movement, or you could put your legs into it and change the gear ratio at the crank and then transform the whole system. Self-compassion is the crank. So how do you actually practice this without turning it into avoidance or softness? I'm going to give you 3 practical components. First, treat yourself like someone that you are responsible for. Pay attention to your internal language. If it sounds like you're an idiot, or what's wrong with you, or you ruined everything, now imagine saying that to somebody who you really love, who's really struggling. You wouldn't. That should tell you something important. Your internal harshness is not truth, it's familiarity. Here's an example. Imagine someone close to you, sibling, partner, close friend, comes to you and they say that their career is on the brink, that something they've been building for years is about to collapse and they are terrified. You wouldn't respond with contempt. You'd respond with grounded support and realism. Now, compare that to how you speak to yourself in a similar situation. That contrast is the entry point. Self-compassion does not require new beliefs. It requires redirecting an already existing capacity. Second, understand suffering accurately. Most people personalize difficulty, like, why is this happening to me? as if the hardship that has been issued is a personal indictment from the universe. That kind of framing isolates and intensifies shame. A more accurate frame is that difficulty is universal, pain is nearly universal. Everybody at some point loses, everybody at some point fails, everybody grieves, everybody gets blindsided, maybe not equally or at the same time, but no one is exempt. Seeing that does not minimize pain, it contextualizes it. Once difficulty is contextualized, then compassion can become a lot more rational than indulgent. And here's another layer, is that none of us are self-made. Our temperament, blind spots, coping strategies, your strengths, none of them were formed in a vacuum. They are the result of family systems, your culture, trauma, attachment or attachment wounds, your neurochemistry, your opportunities or lack thereof. And that doesn't remove responsibility, but it should eliminate cruelty. Accountability without compassion collapses people, and compassion without accountability stagnates them. Self-compassion sits in the middle. Third, stop turning states into identities. This is where practicing mindfulness really matters, stripped of any mysticism and sitting with a crystal and chanting something. A lot of times suffering comes from over-identification, because I failed at this thing becomes I am a failure, or I'm feeling anxious right now becomes I'm chronically anxious or I'm broken, or I made a mistake becomes this will change everything and this is going to define my whole life. That leap isn't factual. It's a cognitive error. Failure is an event. Fear is a state. Anger is a response, and none of them are identities. Once you see that, the nervous system calms down, not because the problem disappears, but because it stops threatening your entire sense of self. Change is constant. Permanence is an illusion that we project onto moments, and I've got a whole nother episode all about permanence. Stay tuned for that one. But here's the clarification. Self-compassion is not about making discomfort disappear. That would be avoidance. Self-compassion is about creating enough internal space that discomfort doesn't turn into poison. You're not trying to reframe it into inspiration. You're not trying to rush to resolve it. You're allowing it to exist without hostility. And that alone can reduce suffering dramatically. Here's an example that may land for some people, or try to filter it however it would make sense for you. But let's say that somebody has a lapse or a relapse after several years of sobriety. Or maybe they don't even relapse. Let's just say that they catch themselves scrolling, overeating, chasing validation, or doing something compulsive. And the internal story is not in that moment, I'm dysregulated right now. It shifts to, I'm wired wrong. This proves that I'm a piece of shit. I can't ever grow or do it right. Or I'll never change. I'm always going to be this way. Notice that nothing there is describing the event. It's describing a self. Let's do another one. You set a boundary and someone reacts poorly to that. And afterward, you feel anxious. And instead of recognizing my nervous system feels activated because I disrupted the attachment, instead, the story becomes, I always screw relationships up, or I shouldn't have said anything, or I don't know how to, there's a recovery reading, I think, that says that alcoholics lack the ability to form a partnership with others. Yuck, I hate language like that. It's just so ugly. Notice the state becomes identity. And once that happens, the nervous system treats the moment as existential, not something happened, but instead something is wrong with me. And that's why the reaction feels so big. So here's a simple practice for this week. If you notice an internal self-attack, pause. Oh, I hate silence. What did you notice? Imagine someone who you are responsible for dealing with the same thing. Notice the shift in tone. Now, aim that tone inward. It doesn't excuse behavior or deny reality. It removes unnecessary internal harm. That's not weakness. That is good self-leadership. So I'll leave you with this. Everyone wants to change the world, but no one seems to want to examine how they treat themselves under pressure. The way that you relate to your own difficulty sets the ceiling for how you show up everywhere else. Start there. That's where the real work is. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.